Hello, everyone. Hello, my dear friends, my dear students. Welcome back to Python class. We just discussed containers last lesson, how to combine variables into bigger, let's say, boxes or containers. And we covered three popular containers in Python. Maybe number one, it's a list, then dictionary, and tuple. Today, we are going to look at both containers and loops. So we covered them both. Loops, for loop, while loop, and containers. So let's analyze now the relationship between them, because very common mistake I see in many books, in many tutorials, the writer kind of mix up those two things. They should be separated. Loops are loops. Containers are containers. So we cannot, let's say, explain loops just using containers because it's different things. Loops is a universal concept. It's just a repetition of something, not necessarily loops connected to containers. You can apply them in many different real-life situations that have nothing to do with data containers. On the other hand, obviously, because containers are big, their capacity may be huge, we need some tools to go through, to scan, to process. And yes, loops are essentials in order to process containers. So definitely, it's hard to imagine how we would approach containers if we don't have loops. So let's discuss now this relationship. And if I have a list, you see line 1, migrate list, I can print it. By the way, print library function very versatile. It can print lists, dictionaries, it can print tuples. But then I'm trying to loop through my list, and I show you two alternatives. First, straightforward approach, or I would say classic approach. What I do, I first count items in a list, line 6, and then item by item I print them. So I need another variable I, of course, loop counter, and it's changing from 0 to how many, -1, and you print each item. So list, in a way, very similar to computer memory RAM. That's why it's so popular, because it's basically a small presentation of computer memory. In computer memory, any cell has address and has a value. The same for list. Any item has an index, the address, and it has a value. So what I do in loop, the first loop, I printing all the values using their indexes. So I would say it's like a classic straightforward approach to go through the list using for loop. And of course, range library function. So what I expect here, I expect all the grades to be printed. But there is, let's say, modern technique when you looping through the values. So you like, I don't care what's the index or what's the address of my mark, my grade. I just want to see all my grades. So in that purpose, for that purpose, you see, you create a temporary variable grade. You don't have to calculate how many. You just provide the name of the list. And in this loop, all the values going to be printed. So basically, the second loop does the same as the first one, and it looks like it is simpler. Well, probably it is. Of course, it's going to produce the same output, but what's the disadvantage? The disadvantage of this new approach of looping, when you disregard indexes, you just interested in the values of your list. The disadvantage is you're not able to change the values. So let's say now I decided as a teacher to give a student a small push. So let's say he was very active during the term, and at the end of the term I decided to add 5% to all his marks. So I can do it in a classic loop. You see, I'm using indexes, and for each index I increment mark or grade by 5%. But the attempt to do the same using new loop is not going to work. So this loop without indexes, loop through the values only, is good for reading, for scanning, but it's not good for changing your list. And what you're going to see here, despite of the fact Python compiler is fine, there is nothing wrong from the compiler point of view here, you won't get what you wanted. So this loop won't increment. Your list going to stay the same as it was before this loop. Okay, let's run it. So look, I'm trying to do looping 4 times. First, I'm just printing items using indexes and using just values. Second time, I'm trying to modify my list using indexes and using values. And this attempt not going to work. So let's run it. And what you see here, the original list of the marks, of the grades. Then you see the same result if I do it in a classic way, or I print my marks in a modern way. No problem. However, the attempt to modify the list is okay if you do it using indexes, but it's not working when you use values. You see, after you incremented your list using indexes, you didn't increment it using values, and that's a proof. So please be careful, use both techniques to process lists. However, be careful. This straightforward approach more powerful, and this approach, which is simpler, I agree, is kind of limited. Okay, can I use for container processing while? Yes, of course. While construct or statement is very, let's say, generic, versatile, and absolutely you can loop through your container using while loop. Again, you have to calculate how many items. You have to set up counter, and while your counter is less than how many, let's say I increment my marks and then I print them again. Of course, you have to be careful in your while loop. You have to change your counter, otherwise you end up having endless loop. So this is really important line. So I'm gonna see the original list, and then after while loop I'm gonna see incremented grades. Let's prove it. Let's run it. And yes, that's what exactly I wanted to achieve. Dictionaries. They don't have indexes, but they have keys. So you may look at the dictionary as a pair key value, let's say set of pairs. For example, I may keep in my grades dictionary not only actual grades, but also the topics, the languages student is studying. So you see the advantage of the dictionary. Your indexes, they're not numeric, they are symbolic, they are more descriptive. And I can now loop through my dictionary, again using for loop. And because we don't have any more indexes, we cannot increment them. You use for key using a second technique. So look, I'm looping through the values of my dictionary here, and I increment each mark for each subject by 1. I print before and I print after. So for each subject here, I increment mark by 1. Sometimes you want to go through your dictionary and you want to analyze only the keys. That's possible. And you see how to use loop just for the keys. You need a special method keys. So if I use this form of loop, I don't really touch values. I'm just interested to print all the keys of my dictionary. Let's run it and let's see. First, that was my dictionary at the beginning. Then I did increment. Each mark was incremented by 1. And then finally I did a looping through the keys. I disregard the values of my dictionary. I just printed the subjects, the languages my student studied. And of course, you can use loops for tuples absolutely the same way you use them for the list. You remember, tuple is just a weak, let's say, limited list. But the advantage of the tuple is faster to process. It's more efficient, but it's immutable and it cannot be changed after you create the tuple. So you see how I'm looping through the tuple, and actually I can, let me show both. Of course, I can use indexes. The same way. Of course, I have to calculate. Let's calculate how many. Grades. And then I'm looping through the range. I print all my marks using index in a square brackets. So that's like a classic approach, and this is modern. I'm not saying which one is better, it's up to you. They have, as I told you, advantages and disadvantages, but I expect the same result for both loops. Let me save it, let me run it, and I have an issue. Let me check the error message, line 5. I don't have list grade, I have list my grades. So sometimes you see even the teacher can be very, very silly. And now it should work. Let's save the changes. Let's run it. And you see identical results for classic looping technique and for the modern looping technique. But remember, tuples are immutable. You cannot modify them after they created. So thank you very much, please, for watching. Support the channel. Don't forget, by your likes, your comments, and see you tomorrow. We are going to discuss new topic. So basically we are getting very, very close to the end of the fundamentals. of the Python, and very soon more interesting stuff. We are going to start object-oriented programming and Python, and we are going to apply. It's not enough to discuss OOP, you have to see how it's working in real life. So wait for my next lessons. I wish you the best. Take care.